One of the things we're trying to do here is just say, a local matriarch said, hey guys, if you're so smart, make the river flow again.
Yeah.
So that's what we've been doing for 5 or 6 years. What would it take to make the river flow again? So this idea, the surest way to heal an ecosystem is to essentially make it a whole system. So if you look at Costa Rica, this was the forest cover, 1940, 50, 61, 77, 83, 87. And now you can see in the last 20 years it's beginning to come back. So it's beginning to do large-scale reforestation.
Yeah, and also the cattle industry flopped.
Right,
You
right.
know.
So cattle, a lot of this was about cutting forests down because McDonald's needed more hamburgers. And then McDonald's found it was cheaper to do it in Chile and Argentina. So the industry sort of stagnated here.
Well, the land that we drove through maybe like before the bridge and an hour back from the bridge, that's all clear. Is that cleared? It's kind of like higher elevation,
Near
kind
Cañas.
of different vegetation. Is that natural or is that from being
I suspect a long time ago that was all forest, but that's you're closer to Liberia there before you drop down into
Right.
That's really where the whole cattle thing in Guanacaste got started. You know, we're talking hundreds of years ago.
Right. So there's probably forest there at some point.
I'm sure there was completely
And
forest.
would the forest probably be different than it is down here at the lower elevation, or similar?
I suspect that it was somewhat different, I mean, partly because there, it's really, you know, it's a high windswept meseta,
Right.
you know, but I would be guessing. I mean, I think you have a lot of the species, you know, I mean, there's pechotes in southern Arizona, I think, you know what I mean? So a lot of these things are almost pan-tropical.
This is the Nicoya Peninsula that we're on. We're right there. So you're talking about in this area.
Yeah.
Before you sort of cross
Right
the bridge.
where the airport is. And that whole ecosystem up there where there's all these jicaro trees, and those jicaro trees are the ones with the big gourds, and those are classic in cattle pastures.
So what we just began to try and collect information. Costa Rica has an ethic of land conservation protection. So this is a significant portion of the country has already got conserved. And you can begin to see there's actually some corridor potentials here. And one of the national priorities is actually created, this, you know, essentially this is Panama. So from the Caribbean to the Pacific, how do you actually get ecological corridors? One of the big ones is this one that Dan Jansen, you may have heard his work, is trying to do from the Continental Divide down to the Pacific Ocean. Same idea, this is our watershed, this is the various communities in the watershed, and you'll see, somewhere here I've got, we don't need to go all through the details. It's essentially 10 steps to figuring out how we might move forward with creating a watershed restoration strategy. One of the problems, I mean, you essentially have
Illegal dumping,
stream beds that have become eroded. And this is the woman who said, make the river flow again.
Yeah, we finally said, come on, you guys have been down here on 2 or 3 courses, you know, why don't you do something? Like, you know,
create a plan that's going to do something.
In Spanish, shit or get off the pot, sort of thing.
The culture that's here is really a cowboy culture for 100, 150 years. This is a guy that runs a large piece of land across the watershed. This is an example of this is the Nandomojo River in the dry season. This is an ahoche tree. This is a development that says, oh, we're going to protect the tree. What we're going to do is sort of clear the road around it. So this is now a very significant dead tree. Now, Tom can tell you the significance of ahoche, but it essentially was the corn here before there was corn.
Yeah, it was like chestnuts in Europe before they wiped out the forest for grains, you know, that kind of stuff.
This is what you saw. This is the idea here. El Centro Verde is looking at a new form of agriculture that can grow crops that are both good for local use as well as the tourism use.
Yeah.
So a lot of what Tom does here is proof of concept of economic opportunity on the land.
And this is sort of our last ditch before the water flows off the land, place to capture sediment and hold back the water and encourage it to infiltrate before it goes up. Because once it's in a stream, you know, It's in the ocean, virtually.
This was one of our one of our courses, UVM courses. How do you hold water on the property? English, Spanish, getting people to think about a simple approach to maximizing infiltration and water use and reuse. Local culture, we had a watershed gathering. The marimba is an instrument that we play here.
Yeah, we have to have marimbas when we plant trees. We have to have marimbas when, you know, I mean, it's just part of the, you know, they expect to be food and marimbas at any event. So you plug in?
Good to know.
It's okay.
The
So-
local cowboys around here, like the local kind of cowboy types, like the picture you showed us of that guy. What is his main use of the land now that the cattle industry has largely moved out? Is it more subsistence ranching? Or?
Well, it's a good. For example, let me show you what this. This is Tierra Pacifica, where we are. So you see our watershed. This is a conscious development. This is another conscious development. Tom's part of a somewhat. Tom's very conscious, and he's part of a larger development that's fairly conscious.
You mean watershed conscious?
Yes, watershed conscious. Ecological systems conscious.
Okay.
So that guy that you saw is part of a
Non-conscious development.
a very large development right there.
Yeah.
And you know, he's been on the land a long time. Italian bought it 20, 30 years ago. Planted teak poorly. Wants to develop it.
And it's one of the most eroded pieces.
Yeah, it's badly managed. So what that guy is essentially a caretaker for a very large piece of land that ultimately might become a development.
Got it.
So we did a lot of work on trying to understand the vegetative cover here, what the systems are, what the land use is of the area, what the slope situation is here, and began to look at understanding what happened historically. So historical forest cover, deforestation, sedimentation, essentially the river running through, cutting deep swaths, but creating an impervious layer here. And this is the work of, where's Caitlin? This is the work of Steve Applebaum. His group came down and applied ecological services.
Cool.
Just thinking about, you know, so we did a lot of digging of holes and understanding where the sedimentation levels were, understanding what happened in the uplands, lowlands sedimentation profile, to try to begin to make some assumptions about what do we do to restore this watershed. So these are some key, these are sort of alluvial fans coming out of tributaries, where we began to say these are strategic areas to try and capture. So if we could do what Tom has done here in all these blue areas, we would do
Sure, because
a lot.
essentially our lot number 11
Here?
yeah, is on an old alluvial fan
Okay.
coming out.
Yeah, right,
The
exactly,
stream
yeah.
came out.
So as that comes down, how could you actually plant trees, plant crops,
And if financially, since I like building bumps, I would argue where financially possible, do some kinds of funds to do what's called in some areas floodplain farming. You know, so you make bumps that help to hold the water back, and then your crop mix is different for the drier parts and the wetter